Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube and listening, if you're listening on Spotify, I have another great guest tonight. His name is Alex, also goes by at Vintage Cards Guy on Instagram. Alex has a great collection of vintage and vintage signed cards, and I was really excited to get to talk to him about his collection. So I'll go ahead and get started. First of all, Alex, thank you so much for joining tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Kurt. I'm looking forward to it, man. Anytime I can chat about vintage cards, I love it. So happy to be on here.
Absolutely. It looks like your dogs want to get in the conversation too. All the
Oh
merrier.
yeah, yeah. She'll be jumping around a little bit, so all good.
No problem. Yeah. So how did you get started in the hobby? What was it that got you interested in it, and what was it that you remember collecting when you first started collecting?
Yeah, 1986, and primarily
Mm,
baseball at that time. Jumped right in during the junk wax era, and
hmm
and I was super deep on Cecil Fielder and Nolan Ryan. And I was living
Okay.
in Cleveland at the time, and I would listen to Tigers games on the radio. So I was like a Cleveland fan on everything, but for some reason I liked Cecil Fielder. I thought he was going to be like the next like Babe Ruth of home runs after he hit like 50 the one year. And anyway, yeah, I had a couple hundred cards of him. I'd go to the card shop and just look for Nolans and Cecils, and that was the origin.
Yeah. Well, I remember a lot of people felt like that about Cecil Fielder at the time,
Yeah.
and Prince Fielder when he got into the league. He was hot for a little while.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, those guys were built for like a nice 5-year run. I think their bodies were like, you know, like don't sign them to a long contract. But
hmm
if there's another fielder that comes by, you never know.
So were you like a lot of people and kind of get out of the hobby towards the mid late '90s, whatever, and got back into it later on, or what was sort of your trajectory once you started collecting back in '86?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. Like I would say, let's see, I was when I got into high school, like that was pretty much early '90s, and I don't think I really like kept the collecting up, and then got back into it probably 2017, 18,
hmm
and really started going like very focused on vintage football, really. And then um, a, probably a year later, vintage basketball. So those are really my like fascinations. And both, I loved learning about the stories of the players and just the origin of cards that I never were able to like afford or really look into when I was younger. And then um, yeah, I think like everybody else, when COVID hit, it really like took the focus to even another level. But I'd been like I'd started my own company in like 2017 as well, left corporate, and it was just the perfect side activity to take my mind off of like digital marketing stuff that I was doing.
Yeah. So let's get into the football that you like to collect. So what vintage football do you tend to gravitate towards? Or is it just like the Hall of Famers, or are there certain sets that really pique your interest? What are some of the vintage stuff that you're really most interested in collecting?
Yeah, my journey on it was like collecting the 80s stuff that I couldn't get in like PSA 10s, the Barry Sanders rookies and stuff. And
Yep.
then getting back into the 70s, I just basically like went straight backwards as I saw the populations and demand and like where things were going. I just became more and more fascinated with earlier stuff, and then really hit on like the 48 through 52 years and realized
Mhm.
that's like the heart of football, like collecting origin of like the sets. So I would say anything like pre 1970, and mostly, and I really stuck with Hall of Famers to stay like very disciplined. Um, there'd be occasionally some Browns players and things I'd go outside of that rule, but pretty much stuck with that.
Okay. Yeah. So have you, are you still primarily a Browns fans, or have you gravitated more towards the Texas teams? Because I know you now live in the Dallas area. Do you do a lot of Cowboys and Oilers and stuff from back in the day? No. Okay.
Now I like a retro Oilers jersey. It's kind of cool, but I mean, you could see here, man. It's Browns. I got a Nolan Ryan up there. I've always liked Nolan, like you said, but yeah.
I've seen those. The one where he's punching Robin Ventura, and is it signed? Is it one of those signed ones he did?
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that's hilarious that he signed a bunch of those.
Yeah, he's a good sport. And his Netflix special is really good. If you haven't seen that,
yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Yeah,
I'd recommend it.
Do you have an Otto Graham rookie?
Oh yeah, yeah. Otto is probably my favorite. Like him, Marion Motley. I mean, is there a financial aspect to collecting? I find it hard for anybody to say that like the money aspect or hold of value isn't somewhere in the equation.
Right.
I think it's a spectrum of like I've met some like pure collectors out there that really don't care, but you have a finite amount of resources, you're going to optimize around something like, and I really thought early on that like, it just so happened that my love of the Browns and the fact that Otto Graham was just like drastically underpriced, like for basically going to the championship game, all 10 years he played, winning 7 and, being the best quarterback of like, 50s. And before Johnny Unitas, it was really like Otto Graham, Unitas, and less PSA 8s, like much less than Unitas, but it was going for like, 1/3, 1/4 the price. Didn't make sense to me. So, yeah, Sammy Baugh as well. So I really liked, I still veer towards quarterbacks. I think the future of collecting will stay more with quarterbacks. So Sammy Baugh, I'm probably just as heavy on him as I am Otto Graham.
And when did you start getting heavy into the signed vintage football stuff?
That's probably like a year and a half, 2 years ago. I was just, I had to learn first on some like cheaper stuff, just like, well, what makes an autograph a 10? What do you really like? The PSA DNA on the pop reports, like you can't really see any comp sales of it, right? So unlike, on like you can go to like vintagecardprices.com and eBay and whatever. So a regular PSA 8 of a Hall of Famer from the 60s, you can get a comp, you can get within like, 10% range easily. Like I have, Sammy Baugh, I have the PSA 4 of his Leaf rookie signed. It's a top grade of it. Like, how do you value it? I don't know. I think I paid like $5,000 for that. Like, there's only one. There's nothing even close to it. So I really wanted to make some cheap mistakes early and like figure out how much could I rely on my eye with buying raw and things like that. So I would say like 6 months of education, a hardcore education before I really started spending some decent money on it. And it really helped to get to know, there's unlike, vintage cards goes a lot wider, like the autograph vintage cards guys, there's a smaller group and a lot of them have been doing, through the mail to build their collections for many years. I did do that in the 80s and 90s. I'd send out envelopes and everything like that. But I mean, these guys have really made a science out of it, and kudos to them. I mean, they can sell these things on the market now for like, essentially like 1,000% markup if they got a guy to sign it. But guys like Bob Cousy, for instance, it's still through the mail signing. Super long living Hall of Famer. Like a Cousy rookie, and it plugs a nice hole, whether you have like the 51 Burke or the 57 Tops. Bill Russell's extremely expensive. It's a nice like next best to have, but it's extremely plentiful on the market. I almost think like, is there going to be more signed koozie rookies than non-signed at some point? Anyway, you can hop into your next question. I went on long.
No. It's, yeah, absolutely. No, what
Yeah.
you were saying was absolutely true for me as well when I first got into getting vintage signed basketball. Is
Yeah.
kind of starting as inexpensively as I could. Make sure I didn't make any major mistakes getting into it, because there's a lot that's just different and really unlike doing just regular graded cards, even highly graded vintage. It's still quite different from collecting signed vintage. And it's really smart for anyone who's thinking about getting into it to kind of take it slow. To if you're going for a particular set, or if you're going for Hall of Famers or something along those lines, yeah, go ahead and look for the Hall of Famers that sign frequently, that don't go for a ton of money. That's their autographs are easy to spot from far away, or go ahead and buy authenticated to start off with, and then once you get kind of more comfortable with it, then start buying raw. Because unfortunately, I missed the boat when it comes to signed basketball, especially vintage basketball. Can be extremely expensive, especially for the 61 Fleer set that I'm collecting. I wish I would have gotten into it, about 10, 15 years ago, certainly. So yeah, now that I have to kind of go ahead and, at first I went ahead and got them already authenticated, because I just didn't want to make any mistakes, especially if I was going to spend several $100s per card at least. I just wanted to make sure I was doing the smart thing. And now that I've been doing it for a while, now I'm more comfortable with getting them raw and building up my Fleer collection by finding the raw examples of them and then sending them off to get authenticated and saving myself some money that way. It's probably the best way to do it nowadays for a lot of the vintage stuff, because there are still a few good signers like Hoosie and Oscar Robertson and Jerry West and people like that, but the list is getting smaller and smaller for football and basketball for a lot of those vintage sets. So yeah, now you just kind of have to be smart about it, do your research, get to know other people who have these still stored away in their collection somewhere, and they haven't probably been dug out of the closet for many, many years, and they don't care about, posting them on Instagram or other things. And so that's the way you got to kind of do it nowadays. But it's a lot of fun, and it's what's really made me most interested in pivoting my collecting to the signed vintage stuff. So I don't know if that's how you feel about football. Huh?
When did you ask, like, same question to you? When did you pivot your collection, or what's your current mix of like signed to unsigned stuff as far as like value, I guess?
I literally don't have any more unsigned stuff. I literally traded and sold away all my other stuff to get nothing but signed stuff basically now. Yeah, I would say
what made you so sure of that? Was it like more of a gut feeling that's where the market was going, or was it just like the aesthetic, like the joy it brings you when you hold it?
Yeah, definitely a little bit of both on those. I also just had a feeling that things that have more significant sort of historical importance would do a lot better in terms of just not just market value, but just have a real interest among like pure collectors and people who would still be interested in collecting 10, 20, 30 years from now. I don't feel like most of the modern stuff, especially ultra modern stuff, is really going to hold people's interest 10, 20, 30 years down the road. But I do think that like 61 Fleer basketball, especially if it's signed by those players in that set, especially those Hall of Famers, and there's so many obviously in that set, so many rookies in that set that are important. Yeah. And to have that sort of connection with those players who were important, almost all those players too were just such important pieces to NBA history. And I bet you kind of feel the same way with a lot of the 50s, the 40s, the 50s, and 60s football players that you've collected over the years, how just meaningful they've been over the just for the course of football history. I just think these things will be just more important, more popular as time goes on. And yeah, just for me personally, it meant more to me, and it was just like I said, a lot more interesting to kind of go down this sort of rabbit hole of both research and historical importance of these cards, on top of figuring out market value, figuring out actual pop and actual rarity of a lot of these, which is much more fascinating and interesting than just your typical, graded card, or prism, refractor, or anything that's been done over and over again in most modern sets.
Yeah. Are you? I got two questions that came to mind during that.
Yeah.
Are you going after the full 61 set? Is that like your end goal, like signed?
Yeah, that would be my end goal. I don't know if I'll ever get there.
It's a fun journey,
There's,
though. I mean, do you
yeah,
mind me asking, like, how far along are you? Like, how many do you have covered?
I have 27 at the moment. Number 27 is on my way to me actually right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, in like just like 6 or 7 months time, I nabbed as many as I possibly could as fast as I could.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I just want to see how far I can get, and then who knows? There may come a day where I have to stop and can't go any further, but you never know. So I
Yeah.
know the wilts will obviously be really difficult when I get to
Hmm.
that point. There's no doubt about that, and there are several others in that set that are like pop one or pop two, and yeah, they're literally only like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 known in existence.
Yeah.
That may be difficult, but I'll just see how far I can get, and we'll just see. Um, and
I
yeah,
remember seeing a signed Wilt. Man, that was like it was on Robert Edwards or something, and it was only like a year, and I was like, man, that seems cheap. It was like, 12 grand or something. And I'm kicking myself. I was like, it seemed cheap, and I bid on it, and I just like gave up at like 8 grand or something. And like when am I going to see that again? And what will that be?
I know,
Because
and that's it.
Heritage has started like putting like signed rookies on there.
Mhm.
Like you really can see that they've acknowledged the shift. PWCC hasn't really, like, for vintage signed auto. They haven't seemed to really like. They seem to be behind the times a little bit, but the other auctions are putting like the signed stuff in there, the vintage signed. And
Yeah, I feel like yeah, Heritage, REA, and Mile High are like, I think they do a lot better job when it comes to the vintage sign stuff, and actually putting it in their auction in a place where it's easy to find, as opposed to like PWCC. They always like, or golden auctions, they always seem to put like the signed vintage stuff like way in the back of the catalog, or on one of the last pages that you're scrolling through. It's like, oh,
yeah,
there's where they put some of the signed stuff. Okay, so I agree. Yeah, definitely.
when you're a pure buyer of it, which I've been lately, I mean, it's good, right? You're like, everybody's overlooking this stuff on these. Yeah. And then, my other question was, what year do you think, like, I've been trying to like calculate this, like, that a signed rookie really became more valuable than like a good like a mint version of the card. Like, what was because it used to be like nobody wanted to do it because it would deface the card,
Yeah,
what do you think was the flip year? What's your estimation?
that's a good question. Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of people lately on my channel that are into the sign stuff, and talking to them about sort of that shift in thinking for collectors, and when people really started getting more and more interested in the sign stuff. I still feel like it's been very recent, still not very
Mm-hmm.
long ago.
Yeah.
I would say maybe around 2020, 2021 was
Okay.
probably sometime in that time period.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I still think all the highly graded stuff was going for way more, but now you're starting to see these things pop up. When they pop up in auctions, the sign stuff, they keep going higher and higher and higher. And I think like the Wilt 61 that you mentioned, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think it might have gone for $12,000 at REA a couple years ago. But
Mm-hmm.
then another one popped up at Mile High about 8 or 9 months ago, and it went for over 100 grand.
Oof.
And I mean, that's probably That's probably an extreme example because the wilts really don't pop up very often. But I still
Yeah.
think that's a bit of a trend that you're really seeing, especially when it comes
Mhm.
to the really rare stuff. And like I think every time a Pete Maravich pops up, a Pete Maravich breaks records, the previous record all the time, and it's now like easily five figures just to get your hands on a rookie Pete Maravich signed
Yeah.
nowadays. And I think that wasn't the case not that long ago. I still think you could have gotten a Maravich for a few $100s or a little over $1,000 still not that long ago. But the highly graded stuff was definitely going for much more. And now
Mhm.
you're right. I think a lot of that has flipped for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. 2020 makes sense to me. I think it was like the dealers who were really the dealer vintage guys, like the guys you'd see at the Nationals that have been going there. I think they were on it maybe in 2018, 19, a little ahead, but um, I definitely think your average collector, like 2020, 21, really started taking it seriously. Um, and I always look at like, the cutoff, like at what year, like for deceased guys that can't sign anymore versus like, you know, 2000 guys who passed in 2021, 22 Hall of Famers and everything, like
Yeah.
they probably signed, 5 times as many cards just in that 2-year span, if they
Yeah.
were, unless they were like, not in signing mode. And then the guys now, like I just imagine the populations will keep really, really growing. Like as much as I really want like a Joe Montana signed rookie card, the dude's been at like signing every national and everything like that. And I mean, I have a whole display of Montana like 1983 through 1992 signed cards on my wall here. Bought them all for under $100,
Mhm.
and I mean the cards themselves are almost worthless, right? But just him on a signed card, hard signed card for under 100 just seemed like way too cheap. But his rookie is like 1,500 starting point, and I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like there's going to be a zillion of those on the market. Um, yeah.
Yeah, there's once again, I feel like the past couple of people I've talked to are really still out there and getting a bunch of stuff signed still, and they're noticing this trend, of course, of like how the modern guys that are still signing are getting a lot smarter about it and really putting a premium price on like some of
Mm-hmm.
their signed stuff. They're signed rookies, so like Montana is now charging like $1,000 or something like that just to sign his rookie card. I
Yeah.
mean, but how many people are going to go through that process of getting his rookie card and getting it signed for over $1,000? As opposed to just going ahead and just buying one off of eBay or whatever that's already been signed. So maybe
Yeah.
that'll control the pop on those cards a little bit. But overall, I do still agree that people that are still around, still signing frequently, because more and more athletes are getting asked to do these signings and to sign very specific cards. I think about all the guys that are like in the '86 Fleer Premier basketball set that are still signing, and now they're all getting asked to sign hundreds, if not thousands, of those cards every single year, and most of them
Mm-hmm.
are doing so. That yeah, you have to be a little careful about some of those because I do think that the pop reports will start exploding on those quite significantly over these next few years. So once again, it goes into that. I think if you want to start doing this, you have to really do your research and really figure out um, not just the people who aren't signing anymore because they've passed on or can't anymore, but there are still some modern guys that don't sign very frequently for one reason or
Mm-hmm.
another,
Yeah.
like a John Stockton. He does not sign very often. I don't think he's going to really sign very much anymore throughout his life, and so finding his '88 Fleer sign is still going to be significant, I think, for a lot of people going
Yeah.
forward. But for other guys around that same era, probably not quite as much.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like the few non-signing type guys, and then um, I I'm really, I think the guys that have passed before 2016, those pops are just going to be so different than any Hall of Famer 2020 or after. Like it's if you're building like a Hall of Fame rookie, like
Hmm.
signed from 1940 to 1980 type span, you're gonna have some of these cards that just have like hundreds of population, and then some that have 4. It's very different than like building a PSA 8 Hall of Fame rookie set unsigned, where it's like, all right, an 8.5, you're gonna have a pop of 16, and then it goes up to a pop of 40, and then a 7, a pop of 90. You can really like quickly do the math and like, okay, this is good value, whatnot. With the signed stuff, it's like some of these pops are like nothing. And
it's all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody's trying to fill a gap in a set of like, Bears Hall of Famers or Packers or something like that, I mean, you're going to have a crunch to fill some of that stuff. Walter Payton, I mean, his rookie. I actually bought one, and then it didn't get authenticated, even though it was JSA authenticated. I couldn't get it slabbed by PSA, and Leland's actually took it back, give me a full refund. But I was like, I really wanted that to be like in a PSA slab, but yeah.
Yeah. So who are some of the football guys that are difficult to get signed, even though they're still around? We know Joe Montana's really good about signing. Jerry Rice signs frequently throughout the years, it seems like. So who are those hard to get football guys that are maybe still around but just don't really sign very much for whatever reason?
Let's see. Most of them are gettable, man. Like, like basketball, immediately Stockton comes to mind. Like Karl Malone even is kind of off the grid a lot, but like especially Stockton.
I didn't know there were some guys that were similar to those guys, or
I mean, Tom Brady to a point. Like
yeah.
Once they get uber rich, their time is just so valuable. So I always look at like once their net worth, if they get above 100 million, it's like how much are they really going to be signing? Like Roger Staubach is interesting. He still signs and everything, and he's the richest guy. He's the richest football player ever because he made, I think his net worth is like 600 million or something. He had a real estate empire, but he still signs and everything. So the rule doesn't always follow, but
is Terry Bradshaw? Is he?
Yeah, he's a little tough.
He's a little tough. I thought I heard that at one point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've really been chasing the deceased guys, to be honest. I'm like, it's for me, it's such a safer bet. I mean, you just never know. Some of these, I don't know. I mean, some of these guys aren't rich that are like the 70s stars and 60s stars. Like and it's like, if they can go to a show and make like 10 grand or something, I mean, that's a lot, like to just for a few hours. So, a lot of them go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I don't know if basketball, if there's like a one time a year, highly attended by all the Hall of Famers thing, but I'm planning on going this year to Canton just to see what it's like, because they all show up for it, the induction and everything, and it's like really easy to get a lot of stuff signed and meet them in person.
Yeah, I remember the Basketball Hall of Fame did something like that prior to COVID. I don't know what they've done since COVID, if they changed that or not, but they do have something similar, like a dinner or a banquet or something, and like most of the past inductees are usually there. That's how I know several guys got several of their autographs in their collection from really tough Hall of Famers in basketball. So it definitely makes a lot of sense. So who among the deceased football players were some of the most difficult ones to get in your collection?
Jim Thorpe.
You have Jim Thorpe?
I don't. And
I
was even like,
I was like, oh man, you have a Jim Thorpe?
I have his 33 Sports Kings, like non-auto and an 8. So it's like a prized possession. I was going to buy an index card of him, but I didn't. So I don't know. You ever heard of Fritz Pollard?
No, I haven't.
He was the first African-American coach, and he was in like 1910. I mean, before Thorpe and everything. Oh. So he's really like an icon that a lot of people don't know about. I have an autograph of him that's like super rare.
Oh wow!
But And I missed an Otto Graham rookie auto like that came up on Heritage, and this is when I was just in my like investigation phase, and I didn't go high enough on it, and I haven't seen one since. I have two 51 signed by him and a 54. I have Marion Motley, but the 1950.
How many is in?
What's that?
How many are in the Otto Graham pop report for his rookie?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'd have to look. It's like
All right. I'm sure it's like less than 10 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, under 20. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
I haven't really looked at these, so I was just curious. Like I know you have a Bart Star, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, is that 57? I always
Yeah.
forget my football years. Sorry. Okay, yeah. The awesome 57 football set that has a lot of Hall of Famers in it. I saw your Bart Star in that set. So is that a really difficult one to get?
Not super difficult, but
Yeah.
a lot of them they've been drying up. Like that specific card, I've seen dry up. I can't find a Unitas 57 signed. So the like Dick Lane and Ray Barry, there's a lot of 57s floating around out there signed. So yeah. I was gonna ask you on 57 Tops basketball. Are you just like, you know what, I'm a 61, I'm not going to dilute my my funds, or do you feel like that's going to be knocking next for you to like dive into?
I feel like I'll get some at some point, but I don't think I'll definitely even attempt to go for a complete set or even a near complete set. 57 Tops is really difficult for NBA because just so many of those guys that there was just no interest whatsoever in getting a lot of those early year basketball players to sign anything up to that point. Like I've been really interested to figure out how many autographs there are out there of some of the color barrier breakers of the NBA. You know, the Sweetwater Cliftons, the Earl Lloyds.
I got a bunch of Earl Lloyds.
Yeah, there's like nothing of Sweetwater Clifton, and he has like a pop zero of signed 57 Tops. But I have seen one privately that has been authenticated, but just a blue label authentication, so it's not in the pop report. But yeah, like his card, Maurice Stokes. There's quite a few in that 57 set that there just aren't hardly anything that exists out there for them signed, especially on the 57 Tops. And even more so with like 48 Bowman. I don't think I will ever attempt a 48 Bowman basketball.
I don't have any of those. I've wanted to get a couple. I saw the Mikan just keeps going up every time I see it.
That's another one that keeps going up every time it gets posted. Yeah, I did see you had a few 57 Tops in your collection. You had a Ramsey and did you have a Pettit? Is that am I right correct? Yeah.
Huh? Yep. Yeah, I had a Kuzi 57 signed. I sold that because I got the 51 Burke Ross graded recently, and I'm like, that'll. Mm-hmm. I wanted to represent that. I'm more of a. I like to have like. I don't necessarily have to have every Hall of Famer, but like I usually like to have like 2 to 5 cards from a set represented as a base, like across, and then I kind of start going deeper around the 48 to 55 range. But 57 Tops signed, I've noticed just with like the bright yellow backgrounds and things like that, it is a pretty satisfying looking card. Like if you get the right signature on them, they're pretty balanced, but they're tough and they keep going up in price. So
yeah. I mean, definitely the Bill Russell is another one. Every 57 Tops Bill Russell sign that comes up keeps going up and up like crazy, which I agree with. I think it should be worth a lot of money, and there are quite a few that are just so hard to get, like Paul Arizin and Bill Sharman.
Yeah, I know Sasha P. If you talk to him,
I talked to Sasha P. Yeah,
he's looking for Paul pretty hard.
Yeah, and you can't find one for under 5 figures for sure because they don't pop up very often, and when they do, there's a lot of Hall of Fame signature guys out there now that they will pounce on them and pay whatever it takes to get them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, out of all these modern collectors that have come in, you know, a recession or tough market or whatever, it's already flushing tons of them out. But out of
Yeah.
those are going to come a big chunk of like real collectors long term. And if you're into basketball, I mean, there's going to come a year in the future where you start being able to have disposable income and going backwards in time. And football, this is why I'm like so heavy in football and basketball too. It just the populations and the amount of like availability when you go like before 1970,
Yeah.
compared to the quantity of interest now in the sports is just hugely different than in baseball, where there's like just more collectors, more in the past, but less interest in the actual sport now. So I'm just like,
Yeah.
it seems like the 10, 20-year trend would go in that direction towards those sports. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I joke with people or I laugh with people because I'm like, before I got into signed vintage basketball, I used to believe that low pop meant like around 100 or 200, maybe even higher in certain cases. And I'm like, I didn't even know what low pop actually was until I started collecting signed vintage basketball. Like, you want to talk about low pop, and you talk to the other guys who have collected signed vintage stuff for years, they'll laugh at you if you're like, oh, well, there's like it's like that's like a pop 75 or whatever. That's a pretty low pop card. They're like, no, that's not. That's not low pop at all. What are you talking
Yeah.
about? And
That's abundant.
like, yeah, there's like you can easily
Mhm.
find those. Yeah, you don't get into like low pop numbers when it comes to sign stuff until you're like less than pop 20. And
Yeah.
in some cases they don't even consider it still low pop until it's like 10 or less. And
Yeah.
so yeah, you're really talking about finding some truly rare, unique stuff. And they're rare and unique for lots and lots of reasons. A lot of it has to do with the distribution of those cards from that time period, as well as the fact, like you said, it just was not a popular thing to have those players sign a lot of those cards for a really long time. And many of them started passing away before it started becoming popular. So, people who are getting into cards these past few years due to COVID, and they're getting this rush of finding like really really rare, really expensive stuff that they think is expensive because there were only like 250 of them made, or there were only 500 of them made. Is like, no, 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 no. That's still not rare. That's still not that difficult to find, and a lot of those shouldn't have been getting the amount of money that they were getting during the peak of the pandemic for sure.
Yeah.
And I think you're
They're
right.
driven from flippers. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think either they're kind of getting out of the hobby now because the numbers just don't make sense to them anymore in terms of an investment, or what's being left over are the really true collectors, and more people who are maybe staying in this hobby, but more and more of them are figuring out, oh, these are some of the things that are really unique and rare and will probably hold their value long term. It's not just the vintage stuff, but it's going even deeper and getting into signed vintage, or getting into like really oddball stuff, or like the Burke Ross sets, or the Topps Test sets in basketball, or things
Mhm.
like that. That's truly difficult to find in good condition and especially signed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that migration, is naturally going to keep happening. Um, I had a question for you though. Like, when it comes to, so let's say you have like a pop of like 25 or something on a signed Hall of Fame. Do you Are you getting stuff dual graded like as a rule right at this point? Because I my view on it is like you get the chunk of PSA DNA authentic, which most people were just leaving it. Hey, authentic is good enough up until
Right.
like kind of the last year or two. And now, if it's a pop 10 or less, maybe authentic is fine. When you start getting into like 15, 20, maybe up to 30, you really
Yeah.
want that number, even if it's like a 1 or a 2, just to differentiate from the authentic glob of population. Is that how you feel, or how are you looking at it?
No, that is basically how I feel. I think at some point I will definitely have all of my cards double authentic through PSA. and just have everything in one set registry for me for sure at some point.
Mhm.
I have picked up a few things just here and there. If it is just authentic, I have a few actually in arm's reach of me. So yeah. So for instance, I
Oh,
bought
nice.
a Duchess in action card. I don't know if you
Yeah.
can see the signature, but it's got the trading
Nice.
card label, but the autograph is authentic already. So I do
I
know like
haven't
these are
gotten
hard.
screwed. I haven't gotten screwed on one trading card
Yeah,
label yet. Luckily,
yeah,
like you can see with the edge wear and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I'm like like 50 for 50. So I was nervous at first about buying some of those, but yeah, lucked out.
yeah, but yeah, like at some point I'll definitely resubmit this to get a double authenticated and probably graded as well at some point. But just finding a card like this in the wild, and there aren't very many of them, and knowing that the autograph has already been authenticated on it by DNA. I mean, it really does. Yeah, like I don't mind getting these for now for sure, but I will want to definitely resubmit it at some point. And same is true. Like I'll go ahead and buy a BGS slab one, and at some point down the road, I will send that over to get crossed into a PSA slab and get PSA authenticated, and just cross my fingers on those because with those, it may be more of a 50-50 proposition that PSA authenticates it from a BGS slab, but
Hmm.
I'll keep my fingers crossed and hope most of those get put into a PSA slab when the time comes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't crack most of my beat. Like if I'm sending those in to crossover, like
Yeah.
just keep it in the slab. And hey, if I get the slab back, like I don't know. Yeah, it makes me nervous. Like,
No,
yeah.
that's definitely what I would recommend to anyone listening is like don't crack it yourself. Just submit it for a crossover in the slab. If you tell PSA, if it's not if you don't authenticate it, then they'll just send the slab back to you, and so you'll at least still have it in the BGS slab, and maybe figure out what to do with it down the road or whatever, or
Hmm.
maybe sell it and try and buy a different one or something. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's definitely what I would do for sure.
yeah. Beckett. I don't think Beckett's going anywhere. They're
Yeah.
here in Dallas, so I actually go up to their office every once in a while, drop it off. They've invested in their business. They've gotten like a new head office and stuff like that. So I don't think they're over leveraged or anything. So I, I don't see it going the way of a GAI or anything like that. So even if it doesn't cross over, just hold on to it. And I think it's a good move.
Yeah, I think so. But I will hope that I will have 100% PSA
Yeah.
slabbed and double authenticated for my 61 Fleer, especially at some point. Some of my other stuff I'm collecting just as side PC stuff. It's not too terribly important as long as it is authenticated by one of the major authentication companies, and I feel pretty confident in what it is and how high of a grade it is. I don't necessarily need it graded. If I know that it is a 5 or a 6, whatever, then I'll treat it as such. Even if I'm buying it from another person, if they don't have to necessarily have it as a PSA 5. If I know it's a PSA 5, I'll give them the value of a PSA 5. So.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's the main thing. Is like if it comes to my passion project, which is 61 Fleer, I'm a little bit more picky about it, but some of my other stuff, I'm not quite as picky about it.
Yep. I feel the same way. I prioritize getting my stuff over to PSA, but it's not like some sort of like has to happen. I'm okay with having some other slabs mixed in. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the things that you can think of that you are most proud of having in your collection overall, besides the autogram rookie that you
Hmm.
have? Are there other things that kind of stand out that you really take a lot of pride in getting or owning?
Hmm. Yeah, I, I really think like matchbooks are highly undervalued. So like I have a lot of those I've built up over time, and I just think they're cool. They're low pop. They actually display well in a slab, and they're from the war years. So like a lot of the stuff in 40 it starts basketball starts with 48 Bowman mainstream, and then
Hmm.
um, same with football. But then you have like 33 and all these gap years between the 30s and early 40s, and the matchbooks, at least in football, really fill that in. And actually, in basketball, Larry Bird has a 1980 Liberty matchbook that comes in like all different colors. So actually, I almost have like the whole rainbow completed of Larry Bird 1980 matchbooks. So that's like a little bit of an oddball one, but I like it. I think I'll be holding on to those for a long time. I just found. Have you heard of the 1903? What's it called? It starts with a T. It's the women basketball college players.
I've seen them, but I don't know much about them.
Yeah, Tetra. Anyway, they're like, the 1909, 1910 Murad tobacco college cards were like the Williams College is known as like the first basketball card, but really those women's cards from 1903 are the first. I just won 3 of them on Robert Edwards, so those are incoming right now. I'm kind of excited about those and seeing if I can get. I don't think PSA has slabbed any, but SGC has, so it's one of those. I really like ones that are on the cusp of like PSA accepting, and if you can like convince them to accept to actually grade it. Like I have these. Let me see if I hold on one second. Like this 1950 Japanese Manko. They call them a pog. It comes from like the top of a like a milk carton in Japan. So this is Otto Graham. Like I have some old football guys that verify that, and it's from 1950 in Japan, but PSA won't grade it. So I've sent one in, and I've sent this like explanation and trying to get them to grade it. Because I mean, this would be the only other Otto Graham 1950 rookie. It'd be like his only alt rookie, and I'd have 2 out of the 3 that exist that I know of. So anyway, I like those kind of adventures, like the oddball stuff, and
that's really cool. I had no idea that there were 1950s Japanese pogs of American football players. I would have never guessed that.
There's a George Mikan.
Oh, really? Like, I didn't know that.
It's like it says like basketball player, and then they like somebody convinced SGC to put George Mikan on it. So it's 1950. It's not his rookie.
Oh, okay.
But it's like it's cool, and it has the glasses on and everything. It's like definitely him, but it's these Japanese. It's all the other in the set is like Japanese players, and then they have this Otto Graham, and they have like some baseball players as well. So anyway, those are the ones that like I hold on to, and other than that, I mean, it's the 40s and 50s high grade stuff mostly. Like,
yeah,
those are the ones that took some work and following a lot of auctions and a lot of relationships I've built and gotten, purchases and trades that maybe were like off market. It took some work.
Yeah, like your Jim Thorpe Sports King. How did you get that one? Was that a simple auction, or was that a little bit more difficult?
No, that was Tony Arnold from Tony E-Trade. He actually he had it up for sale like 3 years ago, and he usually has like pretty fair prices on some tough cards, and I got him down like a little bit, but I remember when he's let it go, he's like, I might like regret letting this one go, or this is like a really good card or whatever. And I tried to buy an Otto Graham PSA 9 off him one time at a show, and he's like, I could tell he had the same pull as me. He's like, I think this is going to go up. And then I think I was in like low 30s. I was offering him. I know he had won it for like 20, like 6 months before that. And then one just sold for like 115. So he hit a nice one on that, but yeah.
Yeah. Do you have in football? Is it like 48 leave, or is it 57 tops? That's like some of your favorites are your favorite sets. Do you have a particular favorite set in vintage football?
Oh yeah. I always go back to 48 leaf. Like,
okay.
So I have like, I've been building up more signed ones. Here, I'll grab a couple real quick.
Sure.
So I have like a wall display that has like basically one player per year represented. But yeah, I just think these like with the bright background, they just look really nice signed. So like,
yeah.
color barrier breaker, George Farrow. With the yellow background. So I like these. This Van Buren, it's like a blue on blue. So, but this is like a impossible card, and it's like in great condition of 4. So this one and like the Van Buren sign or the Sammy Baugh sign from 48, very very cool.
Yeah, those do look pretty cool. Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know, man. I like 70s basketball cards signed as well. Like there's something about like there's like a million of these out there, but just like Rick Barry signed is a really cool card. Like Tiny Archibald. So I posted a bunch of these on my Instagram, but I'll tell you what else I really have been getting into as well is like the triple signed, like these leaders cards. Here, my thesis on that is like all it takes is like basically one of those guys to pass away, make that card impossible to get after, you know? So as opposed to like a single player passing and it becoming extremely scarce, like one guy on there and then the card becomes impossible to get. So I'm a fan of these triple signed ones.
Yeah, I mean, in basketball especially, there were not very many years that they did a ton of those triple like team leader cards, or obviously you had the 81 3-panel sets cards, and there just weren't very many in particular that had 3 Hall of Famers on the same card. But there are a couple that I saw in your collection. Was like, and that's very interesting because you have 3 Hall of Famers in that time period, all in the same card, all signed. And you see that a lot in baseball, but you don't see a lot of that in basketball. And those are kind of interesting, definitely.
Yeah, I think the most famous one being, I have this in here. Yeah, the Magic Bird Irving triple signed. So I think this one like sticking in my collection and just like, do I move this or not? Like I never can move it. Like even though this is a plentiful card, it's just like it checks all the boxes of like I don't need to get another Magic or Bird like rookie from this year, and like it's got Dr. J. I don't have to chase Dr. J 72. So when I really have like decided I want to hang on to this one, it really got me into like, all right, like so I have like some other ones signed from like 80. Yeah, so I'm a fan of those. I think they're cool.
Absolutely, and definitely very unique for sure. I too am a big fan of like 72 tops. I don't know. There's something about that set and having some of the sign players from that set too. Yeah, they're great to look at, and they're great, especially if it's like it's. I mean, if it's a bold signature, it looks pretty cool still. But there's also something cool about it if it's like a vintage ballpoint pen signature on some of those early cards that just make it I don't know, make it look like an old school Topps baseball card, but it's actually been held and signed by that player, and it's just really cool aesthetically for sure.
Yeah. Now the ballpoint pen versus Sharpie for the vintage is a really interesting. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm like, it makes me confident that it's like authentic because who would fake a ballpoint pen, right? So I'm like, but then like a nice Sharpie really balances out the card nicely. So I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not for either, but yeah,
it's tough. Yeah, like my Oscar is a nice bold Sharpie, and it does look pretty cool. It really stands out, obviously, with the card and makes it pop.
That's nice.
But I don't know. Like here's like my Tongola in a more classic, like ballpoint.
Yeah, that still looks good with the light background. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it almost looks like an old school Topps baseball card or something.
Yeah.
With a more classic ballpoint signature or whatever. So yeah, I go back and forth as well, and I kind of lean more towards the vintage ballpoint most of the time, but not all the time. And and you get some ballpoints that pop pretty well. Like I don't know if that one pops pretty well, and some that don't. So it just kind of depends,
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you hopping on and having this discussion about vintage sign stuff with me. I always love talking about that. Is there anything you want to make sure to mention before we go? Whether it's stuff you're doing on social media or just stuff that you're really looking for right now and in search of that you want people to know about and maybe reach out to you if they can help you on some of that?
Yeah, I don't have anything, not promoting anything. I'm just, this is a fun hobby collection for me. Like, yeah, I mean, 48 Bowman signed would be interesting if anybody has any like dupes out there. Like, I would like to have a couple representations of that in my collection of any 48 Hall of Famers signed. And in the football class, I'm always, Otto Graham, 1950 signed. I'm hunting for that. And 40s and 50s. Yeah, have a look at my Instagram. You can see what I'm all about. And if you got anything signed from those early years, I'd love to talk.
All right, then. All right. Well, once again, thank you very much, Alex. And once again, that was at Vintage Cards Guy on Instagram. You can find him there. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk this evening. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Kurt, appreciate it, man. Have a good night.
Too.
All right, take care.